Okay, so we should be live. Screen share. Okay, super. So sorry about the technical delays. Computers are great when they work. If there's any issues with sound or visuals, then unmute yourself and let me know. So this evening we are talking about Isis, great of magic in this feminine power series. So I want to look at some of the powers and the roles Isis plays and the attributes. I can still hear some background noise. So can you all please unmute yourselves if you haven't already? We will see that Isis's two main roles are as a mother and as a funerary goddess. Now, as a mother, her roles then expand very much into being a healer and a protector in association with her relationship with Horus. And a funerary deity very much due to her relationship with Osiris. And I've started with this image here because it is really her relationship to Horus and Osiris, part of this triad, which really forms the basis of the powers and the roles that she plays. We'll also see she's a throne goddess, very much associated with kingship. She is a player in what is the most extensive myth cycle that we have from ancient Egypt. In later time periods, she is synchronized with many deities. She becomes very much associated with Ptolemaic queens, and she becomes the consort of Serapis, who is really a composite deity created in the Ptolemaic period. I'll be considering Isis's role in Pharaonic Egypt. She is without a doubt the greatest export of Pharaonic Egypt, but I won't be considering her roles really outside the borders of Egypt. That is beyond my level of expertise. But if we just really think about her role as a Heliopian god, we can see we have our genealogy here. And from Atum, the self-engendered creator god, we can see that Isis down here is a fourth generation god. And as we might know from our own family relationships, and as we get more siblings, relationships become more complex, and it is this relationship here between Osiris and then giving birth to Horus that much of the powers and the attributes of Isis really are focused. What is interesting, and we will be discussing this more later, that like Atum, she creates life without an active partner, because of course Osiris is murdered, and it is from really the revived and mummified Osiris that Isis conceives Horus. So we can also think of her as a creator deity, and indeed in the Greco-Roman period she is revered as a creator deity, almost on a par with Osiris, associated with vegetation. It is quite interesting that there are no major temples to Isis in her own right until much later time period, 21st dynasty. There is a small temple to her at Giza, but her roles change, and she becomes much more important over time, and that's why we see it in the extended New Kingdom myths. Her origins are really quite obscure. We don't hear about her until the pyramid text, so the 5th dynasty, and then there are 80 plus mentions of her But if we just look at this image from the tomb of Nefertari, this is how she is depicted in her most popular form, depicted with the body of a woman. And at this time period, it's very difficult to differentiate her from Hathor. And really the only way we could do so is by her name in hieroglyphs. And we can see her name here incorporates the throne. And that very much gives us her relationship to the king. And this concept of a throne deity is something that we will return to. And we can see at this point in time, she's taken the sun disk and the cow horns of Hathor, and we indeed have a rearing cobra. And Isis is one of what we can think of as the Uraei goddesses, the four protective serpent gods. And again, that's something that we will look at more later. But if we just have a look at some of the text from the pyramid text, so the 5th dynasty, these texts were written to aid the king's afterlife. That they are really recitations that the king would say, inscribed inside the burial chamber to aid his rebirth. So we see her here very often with Nephthys and her sister, and we've got instantly this concept of assemble, and this relates of course to the murder of Osiris, her husband and her brother, the myth that I'm sure that you're very familiar with. Seth is jealous of Osiris. Osiris is ruling on earth. He calls a party. There are 72 guests. He has a beautiful casket created and says anyone that the casket fits can have it. Osiris steps inside the casket and it is a perfect fit. The casket in essence becomes his coffin. It is sealed and then it is thrown into the Nile. It ends up at Byblos and it grows into a tree. It is felled, it is used in a pillar of the palace. Isis finds it and demands it back. She hides it in the marshes. Seth chops it up and it is scattered throughout Egypt. Isis and Nephthys find the parts with the exception of the phallus, and that's why we have this concept of assemble. This myth is told in a variety of textual sources. We have fragments from various places, and it is principally in the later time periods, but we have allusions to it here with this concept of assemble, and we have references to Osiris being thrown on his side, and so we can see the role of Isis here. And we also have the concept of Isis and Nephthys being associated with the rebirth of the king, and how that the king will join the gods in the sky. You'll go up and you will go down. You'll go down with Nephthys, one of the dusk with the night boat. You will go up and you will go down. You will go up with Isis and rise with the day boat. So we do see Isis and Nephthys in the funerary realm, but very much playing a joint role. But the role of Isis is much more significant and much more developed. It's sometimes suggested that Nephthys is really just created as a parallel, as a partner for Isis, because the Egyptians do indeed love balance and harmony. But this is how we often see the family grouping, and we can see Osiris here has been mummified, his body parts have been collected, and he becomes the first mummy. It's interesting because we can see here Osiris is depicted with green skin, very much evoking new life and vegetation. And as I said, in the Ptolemaic period, this is actually something that Isis becomes associated with. So we can almost think that she takes over some of the roles of Osiris. She becomes associated with the inundation. So we have to remember that Egyptian religion spans a huge amount of time, and the roles of these gods develop and change over time. And Isis, without a doubt, becomes more significant throughout Pharaonic history. So this concept of assembling Osiris and really invigorating him is an incredibly important one. We see that this described in the coffin text. So now the recitations are placed inside the coffin for the benefit of non-royals. Many of them are based on the pyramid texts, and we can see here we've got this concept of Isis and Nephthys, who are going to reassemble Osiris, who is described as a helpless one, a listless one. Rejoin his bones, let us reassemble his limbs. And he's described as the weary one. This is a wonderful statue of Osiris. Those in the UK will have seen it at the Sunken Cities exhibition a few years ago at the British Museum. And it really evokes this concept of the reinvigoration of Osiris. And we cannot underestimate how important Isis is in this. And he is being brought back to life now. This is a late period statue. It was gilded, and we can imagine it being placed in a temple. But these are the images which really show the conception of Horus. We're at Dendera, so we have a Roman period image, and we can see we have the two sisters. We have Isis and Nephthys either side of Osiris, but here hovering over Osiris, we have Isis as a kite, and both Isis and Nephthys are often depicted in the funerary realm as kites. And we have to remember, kites are birds of prey. They are scavengers, and we can imagine Isis and Nephthys collecting the body parts. But here, Isis is hovering, and the ability to hover is one of the key features of the kite. But we have to think that the importance of the power of Isis. Women do not have the spark of creation in them in the Egyptian mindset. That lies very much with men, but they have the ability to conceive and to carry that child. But they also have the ability to stimulate creation, and that's what Isis is doing here. She is stimulating Osiris so that she can conceive Horus, and that's why I said to begin with, we can almost see her on a par with Atum here, as she creates from a non-active partner. This image we see in many sanctuaries. This is a beautiful image from Abydos, and we can see we have the throne symbols of Isis here. But if we just look back at the pyramid text, your sister Isis has come to you. aroused for love of you. You have put her on your phallus so that your seed might emerge into her. And so it's very much about the creative, the creative unity here of Isis and Osiris. Now, some texts talk about Isis and how she conceives from a bolt of lightning. And again, that's very much in keeping with this concept that this spark of creation is not inherent in women, and that they are carriers. The lightning strikes, the gods are afraid. Isis wakes pregnant with the seed of her brother Osiris. She is uplifted, the widow, and her heart is glad with the seed of her brother Osiris. So she is very much this funerary deity who assembles Osiris. But we also see quite clearly in the roles that Isis play that the link between birth and rebirth, because she does assemble Osiris, becomes the first mummy, but then from that she also gives birth to Horus, who is of course the god of living kingship. And we often see Isis and Nephthys depicted as kites, but we often also see them in a human form, but depicted with these beautiful wings. And we can perhaps think that the wings are giving Osiris the breath of life. They're providing coolness for him to really to facilitate his resurrection. In this case, the images are placed on the third shrine of Tutankhamun. So we can think about the wings really enveloping the king and really providing a great protective cloak. This is an image of the reproduction of the sarcophagus of the king of Tutankhamun. The Griffith Institute images are really quite tightly regulated with copyright, so I don't particularly like to use them in recordings. But here we can see a beautiful representation of Isis spreading her wings around the king. And this is just an image we can see of the kite. And the kite is known to make a shrill shriek as it soars in the sky. And in many of the texts that talk about Isis and Nephthys, we do have reference to these screeches. And it's likely that the mourning women that we see in many tomb scenes from ancient Egypt, they are really playing this role of the kite. But we also, if we go back to the pyramid text, we do see reference to these four protective deities. As around the corners of the sarcophagus, we do have Isis and Nephthys, and we also have Neith and she who aspirates throats, which is a wonderful title for Selkat, the scorpion goddess. And we can see that they are really providing this great protection. And the text, the pyramid text also talks about my mother is Isis, my nurse is Nephthys, Neith is behind me, and Serapis is before me. So we have very much this link between birth and rebirth. Oh, sorry. What I also meant to say was that these four goddesses, these are all Uraei goddesses. That they are serpent goddesses. Well, they can be serpent goddesses and goddesses, of course, can take many forms. So we can think about these very much as protectors. And that's what I said to begin with, that the two main roles of Isis as a mother and as a funerary deity, it's from those two main roles that we see her powers develop. From the Ptolemaic period, we often see wooden figures of Isis and Nephthys included in the burial assemblage, and it's very likely that these are suggestive of women who took the parts of Isis and Nephthys in rituals that were carried out in temples. There is a series of texts which talk about these. They're almost written like a passion play, that they have stage directions, and it is very suggestive of performance. So it's likely that women play Isis and Nephthys. The main texts are the Lamentations, which is quite a long text. The Songs is a shorter text of a similar theme, but it is a distinct text. The Songs, the main text is dated to about the 30th dynasty, while the Lamentations, the text is dated to about to the Ptolemaic time period. But they are really quite fascinating texts. They have common features. We've got the idea of two women. We can see that they are pure of body. And the common theme that the name of Isis or Nephthys is written on them, so that they're clearly carrying out these roles. They start out really as a duet, really, with Isis and Nephthys speaking, but it very much becomes a solo, and it's very much more Isis, but it is very much dramatic text. Isis speaks, "I am thy sister Isis, I flood the land with tears." And as we move through time, Isis becomes more and more associated with water. I've already touched upon that with the association with the inundation. And we can think about these as protective rituals also, that they are to ward off Seth. Both Isis and Nephthys are described as songstresses. So it's this concept of noise again, and a vocality. Isis is described as, "I am a woman beneficial to her brother." So it is likely that these rituals were carried out in temples, but that they also have funerary connotations, and Osiris is really being called back to life in these texts. They're referred to as a derat, and that is the ancient Egyptian word for kite. The concept of the kite, in the pyramid text, Isis and Nephthys are referred to as kites, but we only see the visual of the kite from the New Kingdom, and it's really from the New Kingdom onwards that Isis becomes particularly important. She takes on more and more roles from the New Kingdom. We do have this concept of Isis very much as a throne goddess. We see that in her name, and that is very much associated with kingship, and we can think of her really as being the mother of every king, because of course she gives birth to Horus. And this is a beautiful statue, which really epitomizes this concept of Isis as a throne goddess and her association with royal women. We can see Pepi II here. He comes to the throne quite young, he's probably about 6, and it's very likely that his mother acts as regent for him. For the time period, this is an incredibly accomplished statue. We've even got spaces between the arms, but we can see that there are multiple references to the throne in this incredibly clever statue. So when we see the king sitting on the knee of his mother, or indeed of Isis, we have this concept that he is sitting on a throne, and it is establishing him in his kingdom. We can see clearly the link here to the concept of the throne. But if we just go back to the pyramid text, we also see reference to Isis in the opening of the mouth ceremony. We see this depicted in later tombs, but we have the first textual reference to it in the pyramid text. It's part of a much longer ritual, which is about providing a funerary meal. But the opening of the mouth ceremony, it is actually imitating rituals that probably took place at the birth of a child, and their function was to ensure that a child could take sustenance independently from the mother. So that they might have included brandishing a kepesh knife, a flint knife, to symbolize the cutting of the umbilical cord. They may have included small knives, which symbolized the little finger, suggestive of clearing the throat. But what we see here is that we have reference to Isis. Here is the breast of your lactating sister Isis, which you should take to your mouth. So we can see that from the earliest religious text, Isis is associated with providing sustenance to the king, and that it is really one of her key roles. And we see throughout Pharaonic history many images of Isis suckling Horus, and of course Horus symbolizes the god of living kingship. We have really a visual pun, I would say, here in the image from the tomb of Thutmosis III. And we can see he is gaining sustenance from a tree goddess. And it's actually named as his mother, but his mother has the name Isis. This concept of Isis as this mother and protector of Horus, it is very much at the heart of many of her powers. Her powers as a healer, and indeed her powers as a magical practitioner. Much of this comes from this role as this protector of Horus. In the later period of Mamases, we often see images of Isis in a papyrus thicket. We can just make out the papyrus here. So we have to think that she is in the delta, she is in Chemnis here, and she is protecting Horus until he is old enough so that he can then do battle with Seth to gain the crown of his father. Very often in these Mamases, these images of Isis and Horus. They're often placed on upper registers of the sanctuary, and that might be suggesting that this is a remote time, that the Egyptians are trying to suggest that this is from the distant past. Mamasses, birthhouses are all about protecting the divine son, Horus. They are not about the birth of mortal children at all, that they are very much about protecting Horus, and with that maintaining the cosmos. This concept of Isis as a protector is very probably one of the reasons that the knot takes the name, the knot of Isis. We can think about this amulet as really symbolizing many of the powers of the goddess. Its origins again are obscure. We see it as early as the 3rd dynasty as a decorative emblem. It might symbolize a piece of cloth, particularly when we see it in jasper. It suggested that might symbolize cloth used in menstruation. We can think that perhaps it is a variant of an ankh, a symbol which we know is associated with life and to give life. But from the earliest times, we often see the knot depicted with the jed. And the jed is very much associated with Osiris. If we think of the later time periods, the raising of the jed, we can think that perhaps that is associated with the awakening of Osiris that we've just seen with the beautiful statue, that Osiris rises again. But these two are often depicted together. So we can almost think of these as depicting the powers of Isis and Osiris. And we see them on many funerary items. The sarcophagus of Tutankhamun that we just looked at, all around the bottom had a row of the jed and the knot. I think about them here as almost throwing a huge protective blanket over the king. And we can think about them really, the fact that the Egyptians often depict them together. It is very much about the binary nature of life, how the Egyptians see this. But the Book of the Dead is incredibly useful, as it often has what we can think of as prescriptions for use. It tells us where an amulet should be placed, what should be said in association with the amulet, and sometimes it even tells us what material we should use. Ideally, our amulet would be red jasper, and we're told this is to be placed on the throat. And the Egyptians have laid great power in speech, but the power of speech. Any of you have listened to any of the lectures about the Deir el-Medina mummies that are tattooed, it's no surprise that there is a whole array of tattoos around the throat, which would have empowered the priestess when she spoke. So this, the amulet is to be placed on the throat. You have your blood, O Isis, you have your power, O Isis. The amulet is a protection for the Great One, which will drive away whoever would commit a crime against him. So, as I said, Isis has this great protective capacity. We see the amulet also depicted in the Book of the Dead. So we have instructions for use, like you want to have a physical amulet placed on the body, but just as a safety precaution, we also have a visual sometimes. We have the representation of the amulet here, and it's next to the jeg. So we can think about these as protective weapons in Isis's arsenal. It is an incredibly important motif, and in the later time periods it does become personified into the body of goddesses. This third intermediate period coffin, we can just make out the knot here. Knots, of course, are used in much ritual practice. You say something, you do something, and you bind. So knots have a long tradition. This is very probably the goddess Nut, because she is, of course, lifting the sky. So the knot of Isis does become incorporated into the body of other deities, also Hathor. But we see very much the power of Isis as a protector, and also in a preventative capacity on the Horus Kippus. Horus Kippus are stelae, which we see predominantly from the later time period. This is the largest of them, and they have a combination of image and text. This particular example was originally placed in a temple at Heliopolis, but then moved by the Ptolemies to Alexandria. It's now in the Met, and it is referred to as the Metternich stele because it was once owned by Prince Metternich. It has some incredibly informative texts on it. We can see the dish is like a basin. This would have been placed in a temple precinct. You would pour water over it. The water would take on the power of the images and of the text. It could be bathed in, and it could be drunk. So it's about the power of contagion. The Egyptians hold great steed in the power of touch. But these stelae are very evocative of the power of Isis. They are about curing snakes and scorpion bites, and also preventing them. But we see they show Horus the child, and he is often keeping at bay these forces, these snakes and these scorpions, and he's standing on crocodiles. But the text is fantastic, as we're told that Hoth has been sent, and he is going to provide protection. We often have this concept of protection by day and by night, but much of the text is about the power of Isis. Recitation by Isis the Great, the god's mother. Don't fear, my son Horus, I will be around you as your protection, and drive away all evil from you and from any man who is suffering as well. So that's what I said, Isis's role as a mother and a funerary deity, that in essence are the two key features, and from there we have a whole array of other roles, particularly her protection and healing of Horus. And much of these, what we can think of as medical spells, they are said by Isis and they are directed to Horus, but then we have the concept that they can be used by any man who is suffering as well. So we can think really very much of the power of Isis here, and it is about her protection of Horus. This is a much smaller example, and we can see Isis appears here again in a high register, and she's in the papyrus marshes. So we can think of the protective powers of Isis here. Opposite, we have a wonderful representation of Heka. Heka is a deity, but it is also a force. We badly translate it as magic, but it's an energy and a power that can be used for good awful bad. But I think it's quite telling that we have opposite Isis here, and we have Heka, the deity Heka. So we can see these are very much, these stelae are very much about tapping in to the power of Isis and her protection of Horus. So we often talk about Isis as being great of magic, and that is in many respects due to the myth and the story, the narrative of Isis and the sun god's secret name. What we'll see in many of these myths is that Isis is really quite cunning, and she is quite happy to use trickery for the greater good. But she is seen to be quite wily, and in this particular myth, Ra is depicted as a divine old man. Ra often is described as being old, and he dribbles saliva, and Isis knows that he takes a walk around the palace, so she collects the saliva and mixes it with earth to make a snake, and then the snake bites Ra. And he cannot heal himself because the snake has been made by his own saliva. And he asks Isis to help him, but she will only help him if he tells her his true, his secret name. He tries to fob her off, and he gives her a whole array of names, but she won't be fooled like this. And she says the poison leaves a man when his name is pronounced. So she's telling Ra that he won't be cured unless he tells her his secret name. And that, of course, shows us the power of the name. But we do have this concept that she is a wise woman, and there is more rebellion in her heart than a million men. So the concept of the power of the name is also seen in the myth of Isis and the 7 scorpions. The key feature in many of these narratives is that they are designed to cure poison. There is very much an underlying theme about the curing of poison. And in our myth of Isis and the 7 scorpions, this text is actually written on the Metanich stele that we have just looked at. Isis is weaving bandages for Osiris in this tale, and Hoth warns her that she needs to go into hiding into the delta. So she leaves with an escort of 7 scorpions. And on her journey, she stops at the house of a rich woman. And Isis is disguised as a beggar. And the rich woman slams the door in Isis's face. The scorpions are outraged, and 6 of them put their venom into one. So one scorpion has the power of 7 collective. And then that scorpion sneaks into the house of the rich woman and bites the child. But Isis cannot tolerate the death of an innocent child, so she cures the child, and we can see we have this concept of naming of the scorpions and their poison, so that the child is cured. So, as I said, that this concept of healing is very much underpinning these myths. But if we move to the contendings of Horus and Seth, which is largest myth that we really have, myth cycle from ancient Egypt, and it's really about the fight really for who should take over the crown of Osiris. The gods can't decide. Ra-Harakti actually thinks that Seth should have the crown because he is stronger and he is Osiris's brother. So Neith writes to the Ennead, and in the end that there is a contest, and in this extended myth, we see Isis again taking on roles and using trickery. Sorry, that was to alert me it was 7 o'clock, so I didn't bore you all for the evening. But I know we didn't start till late, so that's fine. I think we are on schedule. So yes, Isis uses trickery, and she's often described as being in disguise. And in the contests, Seth doesn't want Isis to be present, but she disguises herself as an old woman and tricks the ferryman to carry her across the river. She also transforms into a beautiful maiden, and she tricks Seth. She tells him a long, complicated story, and she actually gets Seth to admit that possessions should be transferred from father to son. And this is because she has transformed herself into this beautiful woman, and Seth is charmed by her. And then he's quite outraged when he realizes that is actually Isis. So the contest for our purposes in our consideration of Isis is particularly interesting because, of course, Isis is the mother of Horus, but she is also the sister of Seth. So she is in this quite a difficult relationship. She's very worried about her son, and the myth really explores these family dynamics. The contest to prove that the right to rule. We also have Isis using trickery really in revenge really for the sexual assault on Horus. The text is really quite explicit. The Egyptians are quite reticent about describing sex, and this is probably the most blatant description of any kind of sexual activity. And in this contest, Horus and Seth lie down together on a bed that has been prepared for them, and Seth inserts his erect phallus between the thighs of Horus. Horus catches his semen in his hands, and then he tells Isis, and she's horrified, and she cuts his hands off. But then they are restored. But then what Isis does really to get revenge on Seth is she collects Horus's semen in a pot and she puts it on lettuce, and Seth eats this lettuce and he is unaware of this. And then in front of the gods, the semen is summoned and it appears on the top of Seth's head as a solar disk. And really Seth is ridiculed at this point in time. This is seen to be very unmanly that he's eaten the semen of Horus. But we can see Isis here using her wiles and trickery. But it is this complex family relationship that we see in the contestings of Horus and Seth. But we do see Isis not only as a funerary deity protecting the king in his sarcophagus, we also see her as a protector of the sun god. This is an image from the amulet, which depicts the 12 hours of the night, and the bark of the sun god has to travel through the 12 hours, and in hour 7, which is the darkest hour, it faces Apophis, and we can see here that we actually have Isis in front of the bark, and the text tells us the magic of Isis and the eldest magician is enacted to ward off Apophis from Ra in the west, in the secrecy of the netherworld. We see Selkat here. Selkat is the one that's actually with the knives and is actually physically defeating Apophis, but it is due to the magic, the Heka, through the power of Isis and the eldest magician. So we can see that Isis is incredibly important, because of course Apophis has to be defeated every evening, so that the sun god can be reborn each morning. So we can see that Isis is essential really for the maintenance of the cosmos here. As we move through time, we do see in the New Kingdom the growing importance of Isis. On this ostracon from Deir al-Medina, she is referred to as mistress of the sky. She doesn't appear very often at Deir al-Medina, but when she does, she takes on these quite wide and celestial roles. And we can think back to the pyramid text when we saw her associated with Nephthys and the day boat and the night boat. Now, those of you that joined me for our consideration of Merit Saga may remember this stele. It is a beautiful Deir al-Medina stele. And we can see we've got the ravine where there was very probably a shrine to a variety of gods at Deir al-Medina. We have serpents here. So this may be very suggestive of the worship of Merit Saga, she who loves silence. But if we look at the deity that's actually depicted, can you all please put yourselves on mute? I can hear some background noise. We can see the serpents here and the ravine. So as I said, this may very well be symbolic of Merit Saga. But the deity that we see depicted here is actually Isis. And she is mistress of the sky, and she has a serpent determinative. So we can see that she is taking on many of these larger ranging roles. And as I said to begin with, we don't actually have a temple to Isis in her own right, really until the 21st dynasty, when we have this small temple at Giza. This was excavated by Reisner, northwest corner of the temple of the pyramid of Khufu. It may originally have been part of a chapel of a queen associated with her pyramid. It's extended in the 26th dynasty, and it may have origins as early as the Middle Kingdom. Also found at the site was what is referred to as an inventory stele, which names 22 divine, 22 divinities, 22 statues, which were owned by this temple. The text is interesting because it suggests that the temple existed at the time of Khufu, but that is actually highly unlikely. This text is much more likely to be archiving 26th dynasty Nubian pharaohs' rule, and they look back to a golden age. So clearly they believed that the veneration of Isis as this mistress of the pyramid was significant. Both Isis and Osiris are worshipped on this stele. So in the later time periods, we see Isis is synchronized with a variety of deities, and that really shows her importance. Other deities are trying to tap in to the power of Isis. Now, I'm not going to talk about Isis in the wider Mediterranean, but I just wanted us to flag up really the quite striking differences in iconography between our Egyptian Isis and our Roman Isis. And this is really a fascinating statue. We can see the sun disk and the cow horns and the rearing cobra really have been transformed here. We've still got the serpent and the sun disk, but instead we have these grain sticks, and this is quite typical of this time period, as Isis is associated with Demeter in the Greco-Roman world. So she is seen very much as a harvest goddess, and she's also associated with Sothis. Sothis is the Sirius star, and the Sirius star in the Egyptian calendar, mid-August, heralded the inundation. So we can see she starts to have these incredibly wide-ranging importance. The link with Demeter is fascinating. If we think of the concept of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, who spends half her time in the underworld and half her time above ground, and it is due to that divide that we have, well, in Greek myth, it is due to that divide that we have this concept of the crops, and we have this barren and this fertile time. So it's fascinating to see these links and how Isis very much becomes this goddess associated with agriculture. We can see that this very striking statue. We have these corkscrew curls, which are actually quite common on statues of this time period. I always think they look like something out of a Jane Austen novel. We can see the knot is still incorporated into the Roman dress. We also find in the Ptolemaic period that queens are very keen to associate themselves with Isis. This begins with a great emphasis during the reign of Cleopatra III. So much so that Cleopatra VII, she refers to herself as the new Isis, because Cleopatra III has already really started this strong association with Isis. And this is really on the back of the creation of these Ptolemaic saviour gods and sibling cults. And this begins with Ptolemy II, and he creates this sibling cult with his sister wife Arsinoe the second, and she at this point, from this point on, we then start to have these brother-sister marriages, and this of course links back to the union of the gods of Osiris and Isis. But if we just think about the very the end really of the Pharaonic religion, and the importance that Isis has at this time period. At Highlight, there's a whole series of hymns to Isis. They are fascinating, as many of them are based on much older traditions. Some of them have quite clear references to the pyramid texts, and what we find the authors do is that they have taken these older texts, and they have changed them so that the emphasis is on Ptolemy and on Isis, but they are still using these original texts. And at Philae, Isis has some incredibly far-reaching qualities and titles. Lady of the Palace, Goddess of Nature, Supreme Creator, Deity. And this is really the height of her power. So we have the text always begins with Ptolemy, who is making a veneration to Isis. She is the one who pours out the inundation, which makes all people live and green plants grow, who provides divine offerings for the transfigured ones, because she is the Lady of Heaven. Her man is the Lord of the netherworld, that's Osiris. Her son is the Lord of the land, that is Horus. Her man is in the pure water, rejuvenating. She is the Lady of Heaven, earth, and the netherworld, having brought them into existence through what her heart conceived and her hands created. And that, of course, is very similar to the Memphite creation myth, where we have Ptah creating the world through his thoughts and through his speech. But now we have Isis taking on that role, and we have her as the one who pours out the inundation. So she has in many respects taken over some of the qualities of Osiris. We also find that with the creation of Serapis, she becomes his consort. Serapis is very much a composite god who was created in the Ptolemaic period to try and fuse together the religious practice of Egyptians and Greeks. Later texts say that Ptolemy I was visited in a dream by Serapis, who told him to bring his statue back from Turkey. But most scholars believe that Serapis is this composite god. He has been made purposely to try and fuse Egyptian and Hellenistic beliefs. If we look at a foundation plaque from the Serapis, we have texts in Greek and in hieroglyphs, and we can see quite clearly in the Greek, well, the translation, we have offerings to Serapis and Isis, while in hieroglyphs we have Osiris, Apis, and Isis. So clearly Serapis was predominantly this synchronization of Osiris and the Apis. The Apis bull, an incredibly important god at this time period. So we obviously have Isis as the consort here. And this leads to some incredibly interesting representations. We have Isis and Serapis here, and between them we can see what we can refer to as a canopus Osiris jar, and this really shows the importance of water in the veneration of Isis at these later time periods. Wonderful statue, which was at the Sunken Cities exhibition, where we can see a priest holding one of these canopus Isis, canopus Osiris jars. It's a wonderful statue because we really have ritual action being captured for eternity here. These are the type of jars that are likely to be depicted here. These were called canopus jars because they were found near Canopus. Canopic vessels take the same name, but they have nothing to do with these much later period jars, which were very likely to be used in the veneration of Osiris, Serapis, and Isis. And clearly, we can see the pouring of water, and possibly here. We can see a picture from Herculaneum, a priest holding possibly one of these type of vessels. So this concept of water, as I said, becomes particularly important in the veneration of Isis. Fascinating image, as we can see some Egyptian elements and some non-Egyptian elements, particularly a congregation. We, of course, would not see that in Egyptian religious practice, nor would we see offerings being made outside the temple by a priest. But clearly, we have sphinxes here, and we have ibises. So hopefully you can see what an important deity Isis is, the many roles that she fulfills, and how they change, and in actual fact how they grow over time, until we get to her being this supreme creative deity associated with the inundation and agriculture. So folks, okay folks, I'm not sure if Sarah's still with us. If anybody has any questions, please do unmute yourselves and I'm about to start a seance now. Is there anybody there? Oh, I've got some messages. Let me see. We're
here.
Oh, hello, Maria. Hello, hello, hello.
Where's the Dalek? Maria, where is the Dalek?
He's still here. He's there.
Habiet Dalek.
Habiet Dalek.
Right then, folks. So sorry we had a bit of a rocky start, but hopefully we all got there in the end. And I've not considered Isis's role in the wider Mediterranean, because that's outside my remit, but there is a huge amount of material And it would be great, in fact, if somebody else did a course and each week looked at the role of Isis in these various places. But obviously, my interest and expertise is in ancient Egypt. Krishna was asking me, does Seth fight Apophis? Yes, Seth does fight Apophis. We see many images of Seth fighting Apophis, but here it's the power of Isis and the eldest magician who have subdued him. So Selkat can. But we know that the Egyptian, that there is no one divine book in ancient Egypt, so that there are various tellings of, we call them myths, narratives, where we have different protagonists. And in the amulet, we see Isis as being really this key.
Camera, just oh, hello. Sorry, I suppose that we're not on mute anymore. Is that I just wonder because my partner Maya had a dream about Selket or Serket.
Yes.
And,
but I didn't know who she was at the time. But basically, there was this goddess with a scorpion on her head, and she had a lion on one side and a scorpion on the other. And basically, she said, "Do not fear." And then she basically, it felt like possessed me, but also kind of was like a sting or something.
And Selkat is a very ancient goddess. We actually have like amulets of scorpions before we've got text, before we've got any writing. Now, whether they are venerating the god that becomes Selkat, we can't say. But the scorpion, because it was so dangerous, the Egyptians often worship something that they are fearful of. But she is a protective goddess. She's one of the goddesses that we see on coffins. We have Isis, Nephthys, Selkat, and Neith. But she's often referred to as she who aspirates, because she, if you get bitten by a scorpion, one of the things that it can do is that you can stop breathing. But she is a protective deity, so that sounds as if she was appearing in a protective capacity.
And she said, "Do not." She said, "Do not fear." I remember her saying, "Do not fear." Then it could go wrong, and you could end up actually maybe dying. So I felt like trying not to fear.
Yeah.
It was like I was trying to. She said, "Do not fear," so I was just, okay, I didn't fear, and then I kind of obviously I felt like a little bit afraid, but then I just kind of didn't try not to fear. And then I think maybe it was like, and then we looked her up later, and then we came across. I'd never known about Egyptian mythology really that much, and I didn't know about Serket at all, and then I was like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, she is fascinating. That there's a lovely image. I can't remember what tomb it's in, and on the top of the goddess, there's the pointers of the scorpion. But then on the pointers, there's a little ankh sign, so a symbol of life. So that's showing both those qualities, how dangerous she is, but she's got the ankh, the life, the giving life image as well.
Wow, yeah.
Can I just
Thank you.
Can I just ask something? Because I was just wondering about her and the scorpions that you mentioned. Do you think there was medical, because obviously people in the ancient world used snake venom as to sort of sting themselves with snake venom to make themselves invulnerable to snake poison, right? Do you think they did the same thing with scorpion venom? Is there any evidence of that? I mean, it's a bit of a
I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know. We'd have to look at medical magical text, but the Egyptians do use parts of animals in spells. But what they would always do is that well, not always, but you generally you say something and you do something. So you'd apply something, you touch something, you'd write something, and you'd say something. So you'd put those two things together. There's no reason that I mean I haven't looked up how they use serpents and scorpions, but they do use bits of animals in medical texts. There were at Deir el-Medina, one of the workmen. So Deir el-Medina is the village where the artisans who created the tombs at the Valley of the Kings, where they lived. There was one workman who, in addition to his normal job, he was a snake and a scorpion charmer, so to speak. So that they clearly, snakes and scorpions are what would be most dangerous to your average person, particularly to young children, and that's why we have all these images, and like the Horus Kippus is all about cure and prevention of bites from these things.
So it might have just been like what's that, you know, like associative magic, that like by taking on the power of the scorpion, wearing a scorpion amulet, you're then protecting yourself. You're kind of like trying to ward off the chance of being bitten by a scorpion.
Yeah, like I can't think of the name of it now, but it's like magic by association. So yeah. If somebody wants a baby, that they'd have an amulet, that included a pregnant woman. So you have like with like.
Yeah, I found this incredible because I studied Egyptology and I lived in Egypt, and I'd never come across Circa. And when Maya related this dream to me, and then we looked her up, because I thought, well, that there's a chance that there could be one. And then we actually, because I've got a book of Egyptian gods on my shelf, and looked it up, and there she was. I was like, that seems like a real message from the divine.
And then I had a dream featuring, I think, like we then came to, we thought maybe she was the goddess.
The dream about a goddess with frog spawn in her belly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Arthur. Arthur's found the word for us that we've all been forgetting. Sympathetic magic. Well done, Arthur. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was thinking contagion magic. What's the opposite of contagious magic? Yes, it's sympathetic magic. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, she is fascinating. My star sign is Scorpion, so I'm very interested, and I find that the representation is fascinating. And as I said, we can't say that the early amulets from the pre-dynastic, so say 4,000-5,000 BC, we can't say that they are Selkat, but we can say that at that point in time the Egyptians were venerating a scorpion, very probably so that they think by worshipping something they'd be protected from it.
And also, does anybody know if the zodiac is that Egyptian?
No, we see later images of the zodiac in Dendera, for example. It's much more Hellenistic. So sometimes elements of ancient Egypt are incorporated into the zodiac, but the origins of the zodiac are not Egyptian in essence, if you see what I mean.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, I'm just scrolling through to see if I've missed any questions. Don't think I have. Right then, folks. Well, if no one's got any questions, I will say goodbye, and apologies for the late start and the technical issues. Hopefully we all got there in the end, and was fine. I wish that phone would stop. Okay, folks, I will hopefully see you all again soon at some point in time. Enjoy your Saturday wherever you are, and take care, folks. Bye bye.
Bye, Joanne. Bye.
Very much, Joanne.
Bye.